Hey everyone, and welcome to my humble electronics desk. I cleaned it up just for this video. What I have before me is a Compaq LTE 8086 laptop. So over the summer I kind of went into a vintage laptop craze, and I purchased 4 laptops, this being the last of the 4 that I purchased. So I'll probably be doing videos on those laptops in the future. Anyway, I spent a month getting this computer back into working condition, and I spent a ton of time on it because it was just in terrible condition. So I bought this laptop off eBay for $25, and there was only 2 pictures in the auction, neither of which showed the laptop running. And the description was very short. It said it powered on, it wants a boot disk, and that was pretty much it. But the actual physical condition of the laptop is pretty good. It's almost perfect. So I took a chance and I bought it. So the auction said that it was a Compaq LTE 286, and the thing that was immediately apparent when I received it is that it doesn't say 286 right here. So that tells me it's the 8086 model. Anyway, I was a little bit upset about that, but in the grand scheme of things, I just wanted an old laptop to fix up, so it didn't really matter. And also the 8086 model might actually be rarer. Alright, so let's finally take a look at the laptop. Here's the power supply brick, and let me open up the laptop now. And that's the laptop, and the display looks rather unusual. It's a CGA 640 by 200 display, and it actually has a blue electroluminescent backlight, which you'll see shortly. So before I turn on the laptop, I'm going to show every side of it. And if you're familiar with these laptops, you're going to notice something unusual about it. And that's because I heavily modified this laptop. So here's the front of it. And you may have noticed that there's an SD card right there. And I'm using that as a replacement for the hard drive. Also, this floppy drive is non-standard. I actually replaced the floppy drive because the other one didn't work at all. And yeah, this one works just fine. I took this floppy drive out of a Compaq 5000 series laptop. There's the Compaq LTE badge. And this is for expansion cards. You can put a modem or a memory expansion. This is the opening for the battery, and I guess I'll show you right now. So the battery would go in here, but I actually have a EL inverter in there because I couldn't get the inverter circuit on the board to work, so this was my solution to get the backlight working again. Alright, so here's the back of the laptop. I don't have the door that covers all of this, but this is for your power supply. This is for a external numeric keypad. This is for an external floppy drive. This is your RGB out. Here's your parallel port, and here's your serial port. And here's the bottom of the laptop. Nothing much here except for another Compaq badge. Also, these 2 covers I designed and 3D printed myself, and that's why the color's a little bit off because I didn't have spray paint that was exactly the same color, but it works fine. Alright, let's turn this thing on. Here's the power switch, this is the contrast, and this is the brightness, but the brightness doesn't work because I'm using an external EL inverter. Alright, let's turn it on. Counting up the memory, there's 640K of RAM in this thing. So it actually loads the XT-IDE BIOS from a floppy disk. So now it's loading up the Compaq flash card. Alright, and I have it going into X3 gold. The contrast is a bit off, maybe I should change it so you can see it better. There you go, I got a 1 GB SD card in this thing. Alright, forgive any shakiness because I'm just holding my phone right now. But here we are at the DOS prompt. I have Windows 3.0 installed on this computer, which is the latest version of Windows that will run on an 8086. Alright, there's the desktop. And there's Program Manager. Alright, let's load some programs. I have Paintbrush right here. Load's kind of slow, but it's an 8086, what do you expect? And it works just as you would expect it to. You got your solitaire down here. Those cards are loading pretty slow. And there you have it. Alright, we're going to take a look at some games now. And I don't have a whole lot of games because games designed for 8086s were before my time. But I got a pretty good selection here, so let's look at a few of them. Alright, we have the classic Lemmings here, running in CGA. You do need to tweak the contrast on different games to make it look decent, but let's start it. Oh, it just took a second there. Slow computer. And it runs just fine on this computer. I mean, you can pretty much run Lemmings on anything. Alright, time for some Commander Keen. You do need to tweak the contrast for this one. There we go. I killed myself on purpose. Can't really play with just one hand, so whatever. Alright, I've got LHX on here, so let's take a look at that. See how well it runs. Pretty choppy, but the game's actually somewhat playable. Okay, now I'm going to try out Star Control. one of my favorites from back in the day. For some reason the PC speaker audio doesn't work right on this game with this computer. There's the Urquan Dreadnought. Alright, I'm just having the computer fight each other. I mean, it runs pretty choppy, especially when it's zoomed in like this, but it's playable. Okay, I just want to talk a little bit about the history of this laptop. This is the first laptop of the LTE line from Compaq, which was released in 1989. They came out with a 286 version of this laptop and an 8086 version of this laptop, which is what I have here. Both versions of the laptop look exactly the same on the outside, except the badge is different. Later on, Compaq came out with the LTE Lite series of laptops, which were 386s for the most part. I think there might have been some 46s in there too. I don't have an LTE Lite. After that, they came out with the LTE Elite series of laptops. Those were 46s, and I do have one of those. Here it is right here. This is the LTE Elite /40CX. It's a 40 MHz 46DX. And after the LTE Elite series of laptops, they came out with the LTE 5000 series, which was the last of the LTE laptops to come out by Compaq. I have one of those right here. Let me turn it around. And the LTE 5000 series were Pentium laptops. So this wasn't the first laptop to come out. There was the Toshiba T1100 series of laptops that came out in 1985. That's pretty much regarded as the first laptop. And also the Compaq SLT series came out before this one in 1987. But both of those were kind of like luggable computers / laptops. This was probably one of the first that was actually a notebook-sized computer. Okay, I want to talk about some of the challenges I had restoring this laptop, because there was a ton of stuff wrong with it when I got it. So first time I powered it on, I noticed the backlight wasn't working. But you can still see what's going on the screen if you shine a flashlight up against it. And I saw the memory count going up, but after it got through the memory count, it showed a bunch of garbled characters. So I turned it off and turned it back on, and the whole screen was filled with garbled characters. And I was like, crap at that point. Did I buy a piece of garbage, basically? So that was the first issue I tackled. The problem was that the board interconnect that connected the two motherboards together, it had a bunch of corrosion on it. So I cleaned all that up. Which leads me to the second problem this laptop had, which was capacitor plague. Almost every capacitor on the motherboard had leaked and caused damage to the motherboard traces. So I went in there and replaced every capacitor. I checked all the traces. For the most part, the traces were still in okay condition, except for where the backlight circuit was, and that's probably why the backlight wasn't working. But I spent a long time trying to get that backlight to work again, and I couldn't figure it out, so I just gave up on that. And I realized that the backlight on this laptop was an electroluminescent panel. So I just went online, bought an EL inverter, and I stuck it inside of the battery bay, and I hooked it up to the backlight, and it seems to be working just fine. The only drawback, of course, is that I can't adjust the brightness right here, but that's not a huge deal. So in addition to those problems, the hard drive and the floppy drive weren't working. This is the hard drive right here. It's basically a 3.5-inch hard drive, except it's a little bit shorter. So it uses an IDE-like connector. It's a 44-pin connector, like a laptop IDE connector would be. but it's a lot smaller looking. It's sort of like an 8-bit IDE, or an XT-IDE as they call it. So there's no way I can test this hard drive in another computer. And it sounds fine, it spins up and I don't hear any odd noises, it just doesn't work. Maybe there's some trace damage I didn't find on the motherboard that's causing it to not work. But I did a bunch of stuff on this to try to get to work and I couldn't figure it out. So I gave up on that. And by the way, if you're interested, this is a Connor CP-4021. It's a 20 megabyte hard drive. So here's the floppy drive that was in the laptop. It's a Citizen U1DA-14A, if you can see that. So I actually figured out what was wrong with this floppy drive. So this floppy drive uses a belt and it was pretty much disintegrated. So I replaced it with a rubber band temporarily. But that wasn't the only issue with this. There was also 2 capacitors that had leaked. And one of those capacitors had leaked onto a resistor, which was pretty much the main reason why this thing wasn't working. But I only found that out after I had messed with the head alignment on this floppy drive. And let me give you guys a hint, whenever you're working on a floppy drive, do not mess with the head alignment unless it's the last thing you can do. Because it's very hard to get the heads aligned correctly again. And this floppy drive makes it very difficult to do head alignment. So I was able to get some sort of data to read off this floppy drive again, but the alignment was so far off that I pretty much gave up on it because it's just too hard to align the heads on this floppy drive. So I replaced the floppy drive in this laptop with one from an LTE 5000 series because I had 2 of them. So I basically took the flat flex cable that connected to the motherboard in this laptop and adapted it to the pinout on the new floppy drive. And that took a long time because I had to figure out the pinout on the motherboard and also the pinout on the floppy drive that I was using. Then I had to do a bunch of soldering to make it work with each other. As for the hard drive, I had to decide whether to buy a replacement drive and hope that it worked. Or in my case, I bought an XT-IDE card off of eBay and I stuck it in the laptop. And you might be thinking, how the heck did you do that? There's no ISA slot in this laptop. And you would be right, but what I did is I added an ISA slot. So I had to find out what the pinout was on the board interconnect, and once I had that information, I just soldered wires from that board interconnect to the ISA slot that I put in there. And then I simply connected the XT-IDE card into that ISA slot. Another issue was that this laptop will not boot the BIOS off the XT-IDE card. So to get around that, I'm basically booting the XT-IDE BIOS from the floppy drive. So I wasn't the first one to come up with that. I found a thread on the XT-IDE forums and someone had figured out how to boot the XT-IDE BIOS from a floppy drive. It didn't work at first, but I modified part of the assembly code for the custom boot sector that's put on the floppy disk, and I was able to get it to work. I'm not some kind of expert at 8086 assembly, I know almost nothing about it. But the person who wrote the assembly code put a comment in there saying that you may need to change this line in order to get it to work, and that's what I did. And then the final thing I had to do was create the custom faceplates that went over the XT-IDE card and the new floppy drive. So I guess I'll show that to you again. I think they came out pretty good, and also the LEDs work on both of these. So here are the original cover plates. I pretty much measured these, made a design in SketchUp, and then printed them. And there are a few minor issues that I had to fix, like the CMOS battery being depleted. This laptop uses a CR1220 battery. This is the old one that I took out of there. And there were a few screw mounts inside the laptop that were cracked that I repaired with a JB Weld. So to end this video, I'm going to play some OPL music from this laptop. So I made this clone of an OPO3 LPT because I was too cheap to buy the real one. And I might do a video on this thing alone, but I'm going to use this to play some music out of it. Alright, so we have the OPO3 board plugged in. And let's start it up. I'm using headphones because I don't have any speakers on this table. But you should be able to hear that. So since the OPL driver will only work on a 386 or better, you have to go in and patch each game individually. And there's a lot of games that I have that the patching utility will not patch. But I do have a few of them. Jill of the Jungle is one of those, and let's start it up. Okay, I think that pretty much covers everything. I hope you liked my restoration of this Compaq LTE 8086 laptop. Thanks for watching.